My name is Raymond Dahl. For many reasons, I'm an average Irish guy, though most people would regard me as unusually lucky. Until I became involved in serious problems at the age of 38, I had most of what people dreamed about. I was proud to have 2 nice daughters, a lovely wife, a nice home, many friends, a good job, and a new car. Even the horses had been running my way. Of course, I had never won any big jackpot, but as the old saying goes, many a little makes a mickle. I had enough to afford some extras. The truth is that I wasn't born with any golden spoon in my mouth and had worked hard to get what I have today. To be honest, my wife Sandra played a very important part in my happiness. Without her support, it would have been very difficult to get things running our way. We met during a winter holiday trip to St. Anton in Austria. I was there with 3 friends, and during the first day's après-ski at our hotel, we found 2 very beautiful Irish girls sitting at a large table where we had sat down. Boys are boys, and all 3 of my friends began the trophy hunting by courting the prettiest, 9 out of 10 points, and left Sandra, 7 out of 10, to me without any competition. When one of them succeeded in winning the trophy, my 2 other friends found out that Sandra, who probably was the best choice among them, had already laid her feelings in my basket. To everybody's surprise, they lasted for the whole holiday. I said no thanks to the trophy winner's suggestion about exchanging girls after a few days. Back home, Sandra and I continued our relationship, and after a few months, I moved to her hometown where I got a plumber job. When the owner retired some years later and left for the sunny climate in Spain, I bought both the business and his house, which have developed very well since then. Sandra and I married 2 years after we met. I had never had any thoughts about cheating on Sandra, and until recently, I had a very difficult time thinking that she ever did that to me. As handsome a girl as she is, she must have gotten plenty of more or less serious suggestions over the years. Then I met Marie-Louise, which changed everything for several people in our lives. It happened at an information and training course for a new version of the administration program I used at my job. In class, we worked in teams of 2, probably because the consultant who held the course had a much easier job when the participants could solve problems without asking him for help. I had been chosen to work together with Marie-Louise, who had not arrived when the course started. The consultant told me that Marie-Louise had called him and was on her way. Due to her old-fashioned double name, I expected her to be in her 60s. That was okay with me because I had met several elderly ladies with a good sense of humor who had been very keen on computers. 10 minutes later, the youngest and prettiest girl in the whole class came in, introduced herself as Marie-Louise, and sat down next to me. Marie-Louise was a bright and easygoing girl, so we had no problems with the new programs. We worked very well together and had plenty of time to small talk during the lessons. She told me that she was 25 years old and was responsible for the administration in her hometown's leading ladies' fashion shop. The course was a 2-day event, and it was she who suggested we go out together for dinner at some nice restaurant. I knew a place in town where we had a good time. Back at our hotel, Marie-Louise told me that she had a boyfriend who was, in many ways, a nice guy, but they had an increasing problem in their relationship. She asked if she could talk about it with me, as she had nobody in her hometown she wanted to discuss such very private problems with. She said that she felt she could trust me. I accepted, and she suggested her room instead of the hotel bar I had proposed. We went to her room and sat down at the table. After adjusting the light to semi-darkness, she began talking about her boyfriend. He was a good and handsome guy in many ways, but their sex life was far from what it ought to be between 2 people of their age. She couldn't resist sobbing as she continued her story. When she felt comfortable with it, I let her talk without interrupting her. Here is my short version of her much longer story. When they met, he had been a real gentleman without any attempts to get her laid. At first, she was proud of his good manners, but then, after 2 months without any attempts from him, she began to worry that something was wrong in their relationship. She decided to have a serious talk with him about his non-existent interest in sex and didn't buy his explanation about waiting until the wedding night. She told him that there would not be any wedding night if they could not get sexual satisfaction in their relationship. He was a good guy, but she could not think about marriage without a good sex life. Even he understood that, but he felt the pressure, and their first attempts ended in total fiasco. They tried to rent spicy videos, but he found them disgusting and told her that they were totally against everything he believed was right. She had not had enough experience during her earlier short relationships, which is why they had slipped into some kind of status quo. She asked me how my wife and I had handled things when we met. I told her the truth. We had met at a hotel abroad during a holiday trip and had great sex only a few hours after we met at the hotel bar because it felt right for both of us. We had never regretted what we did. It was a good beginning and one of the reasons why we continued our relationship back home. Of course, there were several other reasons why we fell in love. After a while, Marie-Louise suggested I show her what to do to get her boyfriend into action, and we ended up in bed. After that, we had a good sleep until the next morning when we had a good session again before I went back to my room for a shower, clean underwear, and a shirt. When I left her room, a middle-aged woman in the next room opened her door, saw me coming out of Marie-Louise's room, and shouted "Shame on you" to me. I didn't care. I met Marie-Louise at breakfast, which was a real pleasure. The course ended at noon, and we sneaked up to my room for a quickie before we had to leave the rooms. After lunch together, we exchanged addresses and phone numbers and decided to stay in touch as friends. To my great surprise, I didn't feel any strong remorse for what I had done. I really did hope that I had been of some help to Marie-Louise in her relationship. Though I hadn't mentioned anything to Marie-Louise about my own problems, I had a strange feeling that there was something increasing between Sandra and me since she got her promotion 6 months ago. When I asked her, she only told me that she had to think more about the job until she got used to the new routines after her promotion. It sounded sensible, so I hadn't bothered to do anything further. But now I had a question in my mind. What did Sandra do for pleasure during her business trips? I had asked her several times why she and her coworker Nellie preferred to stay overnight at the county capital, only 90 kilometers from home, when they had been at the company's main office for training or some other errands. I told her that I could not understand why they stayed overnight when they could have been home by 5 or 6, and even jokingly asked if she had a lover there, which would get her angry as a wasp. She told me that they used to work long hours when they were there, and both the company and their union demanded them to rest before driving home. Now that I knew how easy it had been for me to do what I had done and that it must be much easier for a beautiful woman like Sandra, I decided to find out the truth and do something the next time she went there. Back home, everything went on as usual for a week before it hit the fan. When I came home from my job, I found 2 suitcases in our hall and a furious Sandra in the kitchen. She shouted at me to take the suitcases and go to hell or wherever I preferred, but she wanted me out of the house as soon as possible. There was no doubt about the reason for her wrath. She shouted, "How could you do that to me and the children? I could never think that you were such a cheap creep. Who in the hell put such silly thoughts in your mind? People have seen your shameless behavior at that damn course." My attempts to calm her down failed, and she didn't listen to my explanation. "It's not what you think. Please listen and let me explain." "Nothing to explain. Can you deny that you spent the night in that bimbo's room? Can you?" She had problems and wanted to talk about them, and now you've got a serious problem, that's for sure. After some further arguing back and forth, she calmed down enough that we could come to an agreement. Her parents were at their summer house on the coast, and I could live in their house for a while until we found a solution. I understood that it was the most serious problem in our marriage and accepted to move out because she usually calmed down within a few days, and any further arguing at this level would do more harm than good. I checked what she had packed in the suitcases and completed it with some more things I regarded as necessary. When I was loading my things into the car, she came out sobbing and suggested I call the kids, but not her, neither at home nor at her job. She promised to call me when she had anything to say to me. I left her with a hope to see you soon, of course. I felt like a pile of when I sat in her parents' living room watching some nonsense on TV that evening. How in the hell could Sandra get information about Marie-Louise and me? It must have been that damn witch who shouted "Shame on you" to me. It's incredible how much effort such a moral watchdog can use to make problems for people they don't even know. I promised myself to kick her ass if I ever met her again. I could only hope that she didn't succeed in finding Marie-Louise's boyfriend and throwing her crap in his face too. I went to work as usual, talked every day with my kids, but didn't ask them much about what their mom did or what she had told them about why I was living in their grandparents' house. They told me that the only thing their mom had said was that adults needed some time of their own now and then, and I would come home again. I took it as a positive sign that Sandra didn't use the kids against me. She even took my mail to her parents' mailbox. I must confess that I missed her like all hell and was sure that I would never cheat on her again if there was a happy end to this matter. To my great surprise, Marie-Louise rang me one day and had some questions about what we had learned at the course. I must confess that I was happy to hear her voice again, and after solving her problem, I asked if anything had changed for the better with her boyfriend. She sounded sad when she told me that it had been worse after coming home. She had told him that she missed him very much during the first night at home. She had been very careful in her attempts to get him interested in sex but got no response at all. She had asked him why, and he told her that he loved her very much but didn't care about sex. If sex was so important to her, she could feel free to find a lover and get it once a week elsewhere. She refused and had demanded that he see a doctor for his problems, which he refused. She became desperate and gave him an ultimatum: see the doctor at the time she had booked for him or their relationship was history. That time was 11:45 a.m. next Monday. When Marie-Louise asked about my wife and me, I told her the truth, that Sandra had kept me in the freezer for a while, but I felt it was high time for a solution one way or another. She told me she was very sorry and asked if I was mad at her for causing my problems. I told her that nothing was her fault, and I didn't regret anything we did because it felt right then, and I would never change my mind about it. My words put a happier tone in her voice in her reply about hoping that Sandra wouldn't do anything stupid. When I mentioned that next week both of us could be out of our relationships, I asked her, "What will you do if that happens?" She replied with a laugh, "Find Mr. Right and get married." I was really surprised and asked her, "Get married? Your Mr. Right will be the luckiest man on earth." "No, not yet. He doesn't know about my plans. My boyfriend is still my first choice if you will pay attention to our problems." We ended our talk by promising to call each other the next week as soon as we knew anything. My feelings after talking with Marie-Louise were very divided indeed. Talking with her had put me in a good mood, but I was sorry for her because our night at the course had not been of the expected advantage for her. I couldn't deny that I had a slight feeling of envy for the lucky fellow who would get such a dream girl if her boyfriend was stupid enough to skip the doctor. Less than an hour later, Sandra rang me and wanted to see me during lunch. She suggested I get a salad from a popular takeaway place and meet her in a park near her job. I accepted. She didn't say anything further, so I was a bit nervous about what she wanted. I was there a few minutes early, and she came on the dot. She was nicely dressed in a short skirt and a jacket. She sat down next to me and crossed her long legs. She was beautiful, and I could see that none of the men who passed our bench on the aisle beside it could resist the temptation to stare at her nice legs. She noted that too and gave the men a warm smile. Her polite behavior towards me gave me a slight hope about some kind of fair solution to our problems. I said, "I love you, Sandra. Please forgive me and let us be friends again. Please, Sandra, can't we?" She looked at me in silence for several seconds before she replied, "I can promise you that all my hot feelings for you have not faded away, but I want to date you for some time before I can make my final decision about our future. What about beginning our new relationship with a date at my annual organization party tonight? If you don't mind, spouses are invited, and I've already put you on the list. I'll do everything I can to save our marriage." "Good. I think if we can make it without any arguing, it will be a very good beginning. I look forward to a pleasant evening." "Me too. If you accept my conditions for our first date." "Conditions? Isn't good behavior enough?" Obviously, it wasn't. Her conditions were that I should be sober during the whole evening, pick her up at her coworker Nellie's house, and drive them to the party and back home. Perhaps she would allow me to stay overnight when we were back at our house. I was a bit confused about her conditions and asked, "Isn't Nellie married, and her husband coming to the party? Why are we not going together to Nellie's place?" "Because it is our first date," she replied. I still found her conditions a bit strange and suggested she invite her friends to our house instead if I wasn't invited to Nellie's. I even offered to pay for a taxi for them. Sandra sounded a bit less polite when she said in a much sharper voice, "No thanks. You can accept my terms or skip our date." I had no choice and accepted because I really wanted her back and to save our marriage. The annual organization of salaried employees party is a popular event in that small town for the simple reason that the union always hires some of the most popular dance bands in the country, and the tickets in the bar are heavily subsidized. For most of the members, it is their only connection with the union. As usual, office people from different companies meet, new relationships are created, both secret ones for that very night and even many long-lasting ones. Some old relationships will be terminated when the temptation for greener grass gets too strong. That evening, I was outside Nellie's house just in time, and 5 minutes later, a giggling Sandra came out together with a rather sexy woman and 2 men. One of the men got into the front seat, Sandra in the middle of the back seat with the other man on her right, with his left hand behind her neck. They continued giggling with each other without caring about me. After about 1 minute, the man in the front seat made an attempt to light a cigarette. I told him that it was a smoke-free trip, which made him begin arguing. To my surprise, Sandra, who knew that I never allowed smoking in my cars, interfered with, "What the hell? Let him smoke if he wants to do that." I stopped the car and told him, "Feel free to smoke as much as you want, but outside the car." He was obviously Nellie's husband because she told him to skip it, and we continued our journey to the hotel where the party was held. Once again, there was some arguing when I drove straight to the parking lot instead of the main entrance. Sandra gave me some sour comments when I told her that we were going together. She was totally different from the lovely Sandra I had met in the park during lunch and had ignored me during the whole trip. I began to fear the worst for the evening, and how right I was. At the bright light in the building, I noted that Sandra and her friend's eyes didn't look as they ought to. No doubt, they had taken some drugs, and I wasn't invited to their party. After some mingling, I was obviously invisible to Sandra. It was time for dinner, which was held at small tables for 4 around the dance floor, with couples sitting together. As expected, Sandra's boyfriend had taken the seat next to her, which had me feeling like the poor camel must have felt when it got the last straw on its back. I gave him a light clap on his shoulder and said, "Sorry, Charlie, you are sitting in my chair." All 4 at the table began smiling, and Sandra told me, "Be a good boy and find a free seat at some other table. I'll talk to you later," which caused a loud laugh from the 3 others. I had enough and shouted with a loud voice, which got people staring at us, "Piss off from my seat before I count to 3. I don't think they had expected anything like that from me because it put a stop to their laughs, but not any attempt from Sandra's boyfriend to rise up. 1, 2, 3. At 3, I hit him hard in his face with my right fist, which caused him to fall back with the chair. In an attempt to stop him from falling, I gripped his hair with my left hand but got only a toupee in the grip. When he fell back and hit the floor with his head, I threw the toupee on the table, which got Sandra and Nellie screaming. When the toupee man laid down on the floor with one leg on each side of the chair, I couldn't resist the temptation to give his balls a hard kick with my heel. He began wriggling like a worm. I took the ice water pitcher from the table and poured everything over him. Thereafter, I took the tablecloth and dragged it up in the air so everything on the table fell on Nellie and her husband. I shouted, "You damn drugged wanted to play nasty games with me." Sandra began shouting, "I'll divorce you. I'll divorce you." I shouted back, "I look forward to that, you damn drug-abusing company slut. Tonight you are out of my house." The whole incident had only taken a few seconds, and nobody tried to stop me when I left the dance hall and got in the car. On my way to Sandra's parents' house to collect my belongings, remorse hit me, and I asked myself, what the hell have I done? But then I calmed down and asked myself, what the hell had Sandra done? After a quick stop at Sandra's parents' house, I hurried home to my own. The house was dark as expected, and I went in. Everything was as usual except that there was an empty ice bucket and a tray with 2 champagne glasses and a red rose on the kitchen table. A 3rd glass stood beside the tray. In the fridge, I found a bowl of strawberries and a bottle of French champagne. Sandra wanted to celebrate something, but why 3 glasses, and why were 2 glasses on the tray and 1 beside it? I decided to investigate the house more closely. Nothing unusual was seen in the living room, but in the bedroom, there was a new red sheet on the bed and large bunches of red roses on both nightstands. Sandra had made the room ready for a romantic night. The only question was, who was the lucky man? After her behavior earlier that evening, it could hardly have been me. Was it the toupee head I had kicked in the balls? Now it was clear why there were 3 champagne glasses. The 3rd glass must have been intended for me while she and the toupee head screwed in my bed. Sandra must have gone totally mad if she could even think I would accept such a humiliation in my own house. That was why that silly humiliation took place at her union party. She must have known that several of the guests at the party were members of my golf club, and who wouldn't want to play with me if I had acted as the spineless wimp she expected me to be there? How could she hate me so much a few hours after our pleasant lunch in the park? She was right, divorce was the only possible solution now. I folded the red sheets and laid them at the doorstep with her ice bucket, champagne, tray with 3 champagne glasses, strawberries, and a note in A4 size which read, "Sandra's 304 house has moved to a new site, address unknown." Then I locked all 3 doors from the inside with boards from my workshop in the garage between the floor and the door handles so the doors could not be opened from the outside even when she opened the lock with her key. Only a few minutes later, she came alone in a taxi, hesitated when she saw her things and the sign on the doorstep, rang somebody on her cell phone, and walked away without trying to come in. A taxi came a few minutes later. If she was able to do what she had done tonight, she would even be able to be a nasty lady when she was away on her trips to the main office together with Nellie. I had accepted her silly explanation, though with doubts, that it was a demand from their union they not drive when they were tired after an intensive day at the main office. If this Nellie and Sandra could take some drug, probably cocaine, before going to the union party in their hometown tonight, what could they do alone in the county capital? I decided to investigate further for some kind of evidence about Sandra's possible affairs and began looking among her private belongings. Nothing was found in her drawers with underwear, neither any fancy sexy lingerie nor any sex toys or anything else of interest in the bedroom. Nothing strange in her dispatch case, nothing in her calendar, no secret codes, no strange phone numbers. We shared the desk in our home office with 4 drawers for each of us. I had never had any reason to look in her drawers before, but now I took a close look in them. Nothing in the first 3 of them, but the 4th was locked. I searched for the key but didn't find any, so I opened the drawer with a bent nail and pliers. The first thing I saw in the drawer was a ring binder with Sandra's salary specifications, which confused me until I found out why she kept it behind a lock. She had taken some hours off at least one morning every month during the last 5 months, and when I compared the dates with her calendar, it was always the day after their visit to the main office. Under the ring binder was her private photo album from the time before she met me. She had shown it to me when we moved in together, and there was nothing strange in it, some old boyfriends and rather innocent party pictures. I opened it anyway, and bingo! Between the pages of the album, I found 8 pictures probably taken with her cell phone's 2-megapixel camera. The phone was a birthday gift from me, and she had been very glad when she got it. The pictures were printed out with a high-quality color printer and put the final full stop to my marriage. 2 were with a curly, yellow-haired naked young man, probably a male stripper at a bar, obviously after closing time because nobody else was in the picture. On the first photo, he had laid his huge meat on a bar stool, and a smiling Sandra, only wearing a bra and panties, stood next to him and was measuring it with crown coins, which are almost an inch. It was impossible to see how many coins she had succeeded in laying on it. The next picture showed a topless Nellie, only in her panties. The following 2 pictures were taken in what must have been a hotel room. The first showed Sandra with her jeans and panties down to her knees, lying on a man's lap. The man pretended to spank her with his right palm, but both he and Sandra were laughing. The spanking couldn't be any serious matter, probably only a part of necking, but with her panties already down, she had obviously even been into some more serious actions later during that evening. A topless Nellie was in the next picture with the curly yellow hair. The next 3 pictures were taken at a hotel. In the first, a topless Sandra was with a man in a white shirt and red tie lying on the bed with his trousers down to his knees. The same scene was depicted in the next photo, but this time the man was naked and drilling a naked Nellie from behind. In the last picture, both Nellie and Sandra sat naked on a sofa. A closer look at the pictures showed they had timestamps. The oldest were taken about 5 months ago, and the latest only 2 weeks before my adventure with Marie-Louise. The only possible question now was what the hell did they do during those trips when they didn't take any pictures? Now Sandra's behavior was a real mystery to me. Acting as a real 304 herself, she had planned to humiliate me and make me a laughingstock for the whole town. Now I knew she must hate me intensely, but why? It was a complete mystery. With the evidence of her own wrongdoings in my hand, she could have confessed her own deeds. It was impossible to get any sleep afterward. I wrote a text message to Marie-Louise, Dear ML, we promise to keep each other updated. Once again, I must say that I'm very happy for the time at the course tonight. It helped me find out the sad truth that I'm married to a real 304 wife. I will get free from her much sooner than it would have been possible without finding the truth after the course. Please call when you can, and I'll tell you one of the most incredible true life stories you ever heard. Your friend, RD. Marie-Louise rang me early the next morning, and I told her the truth about what had happened yesterday. She listened without any comments, and when I came to a full stop, she only asked, "What are your plans for the future?" Divorce, of course, but I don't know anything further. My boyfriend told me yesterday that he refused to see the doctor I had booked for him, so I left him. That's my story. What are your plans? Nothing yet. Any suggestions? Yes, it would be a pleasure to see you again, of course on your terms. Accepted. Your terms don't have to be strict. Let's meet and see what will happen. We agreed to meet the next day at a hotel a short distance from her hometown. Then Sandra rang me, angry as a wasp, shouting about the scandal at the party and that her job was in danger. Everything was my fault because I was a damn creep. I replied, talking about 304s, have you collected your own brothel equipment from my doorstep yet? When will you be out of the house? Probably before the new owner moves in. Want to buy it? You're getting worse every day. Did you want something? You out of the house. The house is my private property, but you can take all the furniture. I don't want to sleep in your damn brothel bed any longer. Take everything except my clothes and some electronic equipment. Are you serious? Yes. The children? The choice is up to them, but I bet it will be you. Your parents' house will be good enough for you, and then for the time being, until you find something of your own. So, you don't have any objections to the divorce I mentioned yesterday? Of course not. It was the only sane thing you said during your drugged, inane condition yesterday evening. Oh my God, it's not what you think. No, I'm afraid that it is much worse. Bye. Sandra rang again 10 minutes later and wanted to have her car, clothes, and some other things. I agreed to load the car with everything she had requested and park it on the street with the key on the wheel. I had put her sex equipment in the trunk. She came in a taxi and took her car. Marie-Louise rang me and suggested we meet that afternoon. I agreed and drove to the hotel. We took a long walk, had a pleasant time, and talked about our problems, which made us feel much better. After a romantic dinner at a small restaurant, we called it an early evening back at the hotel. In bed, Marie-Louise got serious and asked me about my plans for the future and if I wanted to get Sandra back after letting her calm down for a while. I told her, no way, and asked her about her own plans for the future. She looked me straight in my eyes and said that she wanted to get married and have 2 children. Then she continued in a low voice, do you want to share that future with me? Marie-Louise, are you serious? Yes, Raymond. I love you with all my heart. I've been thinking about you every day since the course, but I didn't dare to say anything to you. I love you too, Marie-Louise. I really tried to fix my marriage, but from now on, you are the one and only. Nothing more needed to be said for a long time because we got involved in making love and continued with that until we were totally exhausted after the 3rd time and fell asleep. After an intensive morning sex session, we went down to the restaurant for breakfast and a small talk about the future. Marie-Louise had no objections when I told her that I wanted to buy a new house and new furniture, and Sandra could take everything she wanted from the old house. If she left something of value, I would give it to the Salvation Army second-hand shop. Marie-Louise promised to do her best to get a job in my present hometown. I think both of us were pleasantly surprised when we found out how many matters could be resolved without any disagreements at all. And when we did have different opinions, it was easy to find a solution with some give and take from both sides. I felt 10 years younger when I got back from the weekend with Marie-Louise and found out that Sandra had been in the house, taking more of her things and leaving me a note on the kitchen table. It read, Dear Ray, I love you very much and I'm very sorry for my stupid attempt to be nasty to you at the party. I had it totally wrong. Nobody can blame you for acting as a real man, and I love you even more after that. Everything you have done is forgiven and forgotten, and please forgive me for everything I did and said during that terrible evening when I had lost all common sense. Please give me a chance to explain everything so we can be a happy family again. I love you, Sandra, your loving wife." What? How in the hell could she say that she loved me if she had been cheating for months, probably with cocaine in her nose, and intended to screw that damn towhead in my bed? No way. I couldn't even think about taking her back. Monday was a busy day for me. First at the bank, sharing our accounts, putting the house up for sale, and then to the court for divorce papers. Sandra rang me, and I agreed to meet her on Tuesday evening at a restaurant for what she called a serious talk about our future, probably not exactly what she expected. Marie-Louise was a bit worried when I told her about Sandra's note and that I had agreed to see her so soon after the scandalous party. I understood that she feared I would change my mind, forgive Sandra, and go on with the marriage. I could hear some relief in her voice when I told her that my house was for sale and the only thing that remained to be written in the divorce papers was Sandra's signature. I promised to call her after the meeting, but I feared Sandra would use the children against me. However, all decisions were already made, and Sandra could only make minor changes. On Tuesday evening, both Sandra and I were on time at the restaurant and sat down in a discreet booth. I suggested waiting with the serious talk until after the meal. Once again, I realized that Sandra was a very handsome woman, and if I hadn't met Marie-Louise and hadn't found the cheating pictures, I would probably have tried to save the marriage in some way. After the meal, while we had coffee, Sandra opened the serious talk by saying, "Dear Ray, I'm sorry for listening to my friend's stupid suggestions about how to get even before forgiving you and not being the loving wife you expected me to be after our pleasant meeting in the park. I regret everything I did during that damn evening. I don't blame you for the damn mess which almost cost me my job. Please let me explain my plans for that evening, and you'll see that I had no intentions to do what you think about me. Speaking about the evening, how long have you been using cocaine?" "Cocaine? Yes, I've seen enough drugged people before, so I'm 100% sure that those 4 giggling idiots whom I drove to that party were drugged. Cocaine or some other. I saw your eyes in the bright light at the entrance, and I doubt that you've been silly enough to get necking with the towhead in my presence without that crap in your nose first. Only once. Nellie got it as a gift from an old friend of hers, and we were curious to try it. What about your brothel in our bedroom? Did you really think that I'm such a poor chump that I would have let you screw your tow-headed boyfriend in my bed with me watching or waiting for my turn? He is not my boyfriend. Ronnie is only a fellow worker who paid a terrible price for helping me get even with you at the party. Have you screwed him before? Of course not. You have got the wrong opinion of everything that evening. If you had agreed to eat at some other table, my intention was to come over to you after the meal, tell you that I had forgiven you, and then been together with you the whole evening. The bedroom flowers, champagne, and strawberries were for you, and my attempt to get a romantic restart to our marriage. That's the simple truth. Why 3 champagne glasses? There was a crack in one of them. That's the only reason. Sounds sensible, but I regret to say that there are too many weak points in your explanations. I don't think you've told me the whole truth." She got a stressed expression on her face when she replied, "I'm sorry if you don't believe me when I tell you the truth. What else do you want to know? The real truth about when you began with cocaine during your nights out with Nellie. So far, I know about 5 months, but is it 6? How could you let such a dam take total control over you and let her persuade you to whoring and destroy your marriage? Am I totally wrong when I say that our marriage was better than average at least until your promotion?" She blushed and turned completely red in the face when she replied, "Our marriage was great until your course, but you were wrong again because you ought to know that I've never been out partying with Nellie on any girl's night out. Of course not here in the hometown where people know you. Your wild nights out were at the county capital. I've checked with your job and your union, and there is no rule about staying overnight after being at the main office for some errand. At the main office, they told me that some days you were ready as early as 3 p.m. and could have been home no later than 4:30 or 5. You had hardly any reason to stay there overnight, at least not for resting. I know that you and Nellie took a few hours off the job the days after for resting, and you paid for the hotel with your own money, or probably someone did it for you as payment for your services. Are you accusing me of something?" she asked. I opened my briefcase, laid her wanking photo on the table, and said, "Yes, I am." Sandra began to understand that the game was coming to an end. I didn't see any reason for not going straight to the main point. I told her, "Dear Sandra, I confess that I did something totally wrong when comforting Marie-Louise for her problems, which ended up in sex. Though there are never any excuses for cheating, I will never regret what I did because it let me know that you have been using drugs and cheating on me for a long time. However, I was really in love with you until the damn union party, and after meeting you in the park, I was happy as hell for getting a chance to save our marriage. Why, Sandra? Why the damn stupid games after my course? If you had only confessed your own cheating instead of pretending to be hurt, we could have called it even and saved our marriage. Why didn't you do that? Why be ruled by a damn 304 in a silly effort to humiliate me in the worst possible way? If you had kept some common sense in your drugged brain, you would have understood that I'm not any spineless creep. I regret to say that now a divorce is the only thing for us under the present circumstances." She began sobbing. "I can explain the photo. It is not what it looks like, and my only intention with Ronnie was teasing you for a short time. Please let me explain and forgive me. I don't care about the towhead. I'm talking about all your other lies." I told her my suggestion about sharing our belongings. She accepted my suggestions and understood that all a lawyer could do for her was write a big bill. She signed the papers I had in my briefcase. We remained in the booth for half an hour until she calmed down enough to drive home. We agreed to meet again within a few days to clear up further matters and parted. It was a terrible evening even for me. I had dumped the mother of my children, a beautiful woman who had shared many happy years with me. I felt totally empty in my head when I came home to the empty house that had usually been filled with happy voices and laughter. I felt like a real asshole but knew that it had been the only possible alternative. After resting for about an hour, I rang Marie-Louise, who understood my feelings because her own parting from her boyfriend was far from easy. We talked for a couple of hours, and she told me she felt much better, and so did I. The next day, I mailed bright copies of Nellie's sex photos to her husband along with a short letter. "Dear Cuck, I didn't like it when you and your 304 wife humiliated me at the damn union party. It is my turn to laugh. I've got Sandra's pictures of your 304 wife Nellie in action. I really hope you'll enjoy them as much as I did. Best regards, Raymond." It wasn't very friendly to send the pictures, but why should I regard him as a friend of some kind after what he did to me during the damn party? One of my golfing friends, whose wife worked at the same company as Sandra and Nellie and had been rather close to the table at the party, rang me the next evening and told me that most of the people at the party had supported me and that Sandra's gang had left the party only a few minutes after me. His wife had told him that Sandra wasn't a popular woman at the office any longer. She and Nellie had a serious argument, almost a fight, in the parking lot when they had arrived there today. 2 days later, he rang me again and told me that this morning Nellie had gone into Sandra's office and hit her hard in the head with the keyboard, giving Sandra a real blackout with her fist. Nellie was fired, and Sandra was given the last warning to behave if she wanted to keep her job. The reason for Nellie's anger against Sandra was that her husband had almost gone crazy when he got the cheating pictures, lied to her that Sandra was the sender, and threw her out of the house. 2 days later, Nellie's husband filed for divorce. I met Sandra the same evening Nellie had been thrown out to discuss further details about how to limit the problems for our children in this sad matter. The large sunglasses could not hide the large black eye on Sandra's face. I told her that I knew the truth about it. She looked at me for a while before she said, "It was you, wasn't it?" "Yes, and it feels good that she got her just desserts." I signed the letter with my own name so her husband would know who sent it. Who cares if Sandra's husband accused her of mailing the pictures? Sandra agreed to avoid all connection with drugs to gain custody of our children. To my great relief, we found it easy to reach a fair agreement about the children. I then told Sandra that I had connected with Marie-Louise after finding the pictures. We had met at a hotel and taken the first steps towards a relationship. However, she had no reason to blame Marie-Louise for our divorce because my efforts to get even with her, save our marriage, and never cheat again had been my first choice. I had been sorry as hell after the fiasco at the party. I also let her know that we would have gotten divorced even without my cheating because I had planned to hire a retired police officer to find out what she did during her next trip to the county capital. Sandra got a strange look on her face when she replied that she had terrible remorse after her last trip and told Nellie that she would never again cheat and stay overnight. This was why she had become so humiliated and angry about my cheating and wanted to give me an unforgettable lesson to ensure I never did it again. She told me she had regretted it as soon as I left the party. When I asked her why she had been screwing around and destroyed a happy family, she tried to explain that it had begun with Nellie taking her to a bar where she knew the owner, who invited them to stay after closing time for a drink on the house. Instead of drinks, he had offered them a line of cocaine. Nellie had used it before and had persuaded her to try it. She got a real kick and accepted joining Nellie, the owner, and a young bartender in a strip poker game. The bartender had been stripped off rather soon and had both her and Nellie excited for a while before Nellie took him to their room at the hotel. She had stayed at the bar with the owner and cheated on me for the first time in our marriage. Though she had felt terrible remorse, she had gone with Nellie to the bar during their next trip because Nellie was in some kind of love with the bartender, or at least with his huge meat. She nodded yes to my question. He was curly and yellow-haired. Sandra continued her story, saying that Nellie, who had begun to complain about lousy sex in her marriage, continued to see the bartender, who usually had some cocaine and a different friend with him when the bar owner was busy somewhere else. Courted by nice, funny guys and usually great sex had become a habit she looked forward to. Of course, many mornings she had remorse for the cheating, but as it was usually only once a month and a long way from home, she had not feared getting caught. However, she understood it could not last forever and decided to stop it. I replied that she was totally right about that, but it had probably ended in a bit different way than she had expected. Then I could not resist saying that she, as a mentally healthy and well-educated woman, was solely responsible for her cheating, and I would never buy the explanation that it was Nellie's fault that she had screwed away her marriage. When I asked Sandra if she was dating the towhead, she denied it and said that today they hated each other. She hated both him and Nellie for persuading her to act like a complete idiot at the party that evening. He hated her for making him a laughingstock at the office and among his acquaintances all over town. Nellie blamed and hated her for her own divorce, and Nellie's ex hated all three of them. My short time together with the foursome gang wasn't any highway to happiness for them. As soon as the word was out that Sandra was free, she had a line of suitors who wanted to date her, but for some reason, she had not found any of them interesting for a relationship. I hope she will find some nice guy and be happy again. She rented a 4-room apartment and got custody of our daughters, who see Marie-Louise and me very often in our new house. I was very happy indeed when the girls told me that their mom wanted them to be good friends with Marie-Louise, who is my wife nowadays. After a trip to Euro Disney in Paris, my daughters and Marie-Louise got along very well together. The girls found that they had a good time together and never accused her of taking their dad from their mom. Sandra and I are polite and correct to each other. Marie-Louise is pregnant with our first child, and I've got a loving wife. Story 2. My wife is Grace. We're both 34 years old. I'm not overweight, but I could shed a few pounds, and I've always considered myself reasonably good-looking. During my college days, I had a few girlfriends and had no trouble attracting women. But everything changed when I met my future wife in my freshman year. We exclusively dated until the question of marriage came up, and 7 months later, she became my wife. She had many admirers in college and always drew attention from guys. Her presence could instantly light up any room, radiating energy. People admired her playful personality. I believed we were the ideal couple because we loved spending time together. However, the challenge we faced was not having enough time for each other. I work as a systems analyst at a large IT company, and she is a registered nurse in the orthopedic department of a major hospital. My typical work week involves 9-hour days, 6 days a week, and sometimes I have to stay late when dealing with complex or time-sensitive issues. Due to our demanding work schedules, we can only spend time together on weekends. When Grace works the daytime shift, we only see each other in the evenings. However, she's always exhausted and goes to bed around 10 shortly after getting home. To make up for our lack of closeness during the week, we often talk about our fantasies. We both believe these fantasies should stay as just that, fantasies. She meant everything to me, and she assured me that I was the love of her life. I have no time for infidelity, and she knows how strongly I feel about it. I simply wouldn't tolerate it. Grace works 4 days a week, each shift lasting 13 hours. She alternates between Monday and Thursday and changes shifts every 4 weeks. Shifts typically run from 7 to 8 either during the day or night. Additionally, there's a shift change period that takes about an hour, so she usually gets home around 9:30 in the morning and evening. I've been urging her for the past 2 years to find a permanent job, but she's passionate about what she does and doesn't want to switch careers. So, we've learned to cope with her unconventional work hours. When we first got married, we both had student loans. We agreed to pay them off before starting a family. Once the loans were settled, we decided to delay having children until we were comfortably settled in a nice home and neighborhood. 3 years ago, we achieved that goal, and we decided it was time for her to become pregnant, but she didn't. Today is Monday, and I left work early thinking I had the flu. I texted my wife, telling her I was going home sick. She replied advising me to take flu medicine. I asked her which medicine and where to find it. She responded Tamiflu and mentioned it was in the medicine container in the second drawer under her dressing table in our bathroom. I simply replied okay and headed home. Once I got home, I went into our main bathroom to search for her medication, but instead, I found something unexpected. I checked the drawer she had pointed to but couldn't find anything labeled Tamiflu. When I opened the top drawer, I found flu medicine and a foil packet of birth control pills. She had already taken the one designated for today. I was completely stunned. She had assured me she had stopped taking the pill over 3 years ago. We had been trying to have a baby for the past 3 years without success. My wife had previously told me that our work schedules were the reason for our difficulties, and eventually, our schedules would align with her menstrual cycle. In the spring, I decided enough was enough, and both of us underwent testing. After multiple tests, our doctor stated that there was nothing wrong with either of us. I looked at the foil packet of pills and wondered if it was an old packet, but I realized that the days of the pills matched the month, and the correct pill for today had already been removed. Today is Tuesday, the 18th of the month, and 18 pills have been taken, including today's. They were set to expire in 2 years, indicating they must have been refilled recently. Simultaneously, various scenarios raced through my mind. Did Grace truly desire to start a family? Was she involved in a secret affair? Did she have undisclosed health issues? Why did she lie to me? Our bodies were aging, and the longer we delayed starting a family, the more challenging it would become. How should I approach her? I took some Tamiflu and went to bed. The next thing I knew, Grace was waking me up, asking about my well-being and if I needed anything. I felt better and declined. In need of any assistance, I couldn't help but feel uneasy that she hadn't shared anything with me, but she didn't say a word. I observed her, and it seemed like she believed I had passed out again. She undressed to take a shower, and I noticed that some parts of her body were red. It suddenly occurred to me that she might have had an affair after her shift before coming home. When she worked in the other department, her shift change used to take less than 10 minutes. Why did it now take an hour? She didn't close the bathroom door, and I positioned myself where I could see her reflection in the full-length mirror in the bathroom. It seemed like she had spent an excessive amount of time grooming herself. Was this a regular occurrence? I had no idea because I had never observed her like this before. She undressed in her bedroom, and her clothes were scattered where she had left them. I picked up her panties, and yes, they were still damp. I placed them back under her robe and returned to bed. However, I came to understand that there was a hidden side to her that I hadn't known about. I needed more details. She returned to the bedroom after her shower and climbed into bed beside me. This was an unusual time for me to be in bed. Strangely, she didn't attempt to hug or console me, and I remained on my side. By the time I woke up the next morning, she had already left. I phoned my boss and informed him that I was sick with the flu. I had some sick days saved up and needed some time off to figure things out. I reached out to one of my closest college friends who had become a lawyer for advice. I quickly learned that our state had no-fault divorce laws, and since we didn't have any children, we only needed to split our assets evenly. The most significant asset was our house, which had gained some equity that needed to be sold, and the proceeds divided. My friend offered to represent me if I chose to file a lawsuit, assuring me it was a straightforward case. That evening at 8 o'clock, I parked near Grace's car to follow her. We both had iPhones, so I used the Find My Phone app to check her location and saw that she was still at the orthopedic ward. After waiting for 10 minutes, I realized she was on her way, so I called the orthopedic department and requested to speak with her. I was told she had already finished her shift and left. I realized that she had deceived me about the shift change, which had lasted only 10 minutes or less. I continued monitoring the app on my phone and noticed that the blue dot representing her had stopped in an unfamiliar part of the hospital complex. I left the car and decided to locate her phone, but it proved more challenging than I'd expected. I found a place, but it was on the wrong floor. Finally, after waiting for about 20 minutes, I ended up outside one of the rooms where doctors take breaks during their long shifts. Inside, I could hear people being intimate. To find out who was in that room, I needed to hide, and luckily I found an open janitor's closet about 50 feet away. After roughly 20 minutes, Grace left the room and headed toward the garage. A little while later, a man came out too. Eventually, he locked the door. I approached him and asked for directions, which he kindly gave. He was a bit taller than me and looked quite attractive. I checked his name tag and saw it read Dr. William. I needed a plan. I called my boss at home and told him that I had the flu, but there was also a pressing personal family matter that required my immediate attention. He understood, having gone through a tough divorce himself a year ago. He said I could take as much time as I needed, but to keep him informed so he could handle work. Next, I phoned my friend Max, who's a lawyer, and explained that I wanted to take legal action against Grace since she had left our house after our encounter on Thursday night. He agreed to help and asked if there was anything else he could do. Since I was unsure about my next steps, he suggested splitting our finances and canceling our credit cards. Did I have any plans after leaving her? Was there a place for me to go? I hadn't thought that far ahead and admitted it. Max told me to visit his office first thing the next morning. He had experience with this and had a list of tasks for me to complete. He even had a list of hotels with affordable weekly rates. My first tasks included arranging a small shipment with a transportation company to be delivered the next morning. I planned to temporarily store my belongings until I found a more permanent place to live. My next stop was the bank, where I withdrew half of our joint accounts and canceled our credit cards. I took control of the accounts in my name only and requested new credit cards. At midnight, I disconnected her cell phone after I was legally served that evening while I was in my computer room saving important files for the upcoming weeks. Grace arrived home on schedule at 9:30 p.m. We exchanged greetings, and she proceeded to shower and go to bed. I also retired to bed early because I had a busy day ahead. Strangely, she didn't notice when I went to bed, and I failed to realize how distant she had become. The following morning, she left the house early, and the movers arrived promptly. I had a checklist of items to take with me, and I had placed stickers on everything that needed to be packed. My car was loaded with suitcases and work-related computer gear. Once the movers finished, I went out and purchased a single black rose symbolizing death, departure, and significant changes in the future, which in this case meant the end of our marriage. Placing it in the center of the kitchen table, I wrote a brief note that read, "Grace, as you might recall, I called you on Monday informing you I was unwell and going back home. You advised me to take Tamiflu and directed me to its location. However, I couldn't find it in your second dressing table. Instead, it was in the top drawer next to your birth control pills." Suddenly, several pieces of a significant puzzle fell into place. You weren't even trying to have a baby because you were having an affair with a doctor at work. It seems your relationship with Dr. William was more important than our marriage, and I've come to realize it's been going on since you were transferred to the orthopedics department. So many lies. How could you? I believed we had a strong marriage built on trust and love. Now my heart is shattered. I'm sure you knew that once I found out, our marriage would crumble. Well, guess what? In our no-fault state, I don't need evidence of your infidelity, which, by the way, would be quite easy to obtain. I divided our accounts and took my share from the house. Have you noticed that your cell phone and credit cards aren't working anymore? By the way, you should find a new place to live because in 60 days, I'll be putting the house on the market, and anything left inside will be donated to Goodwill. Now you're free to do as you please. I wonder, is he married with a family? You should know his wife will find out eventually. What will the hospital say? Remember when I said I wouldn't tolerate infidelity? Consider this a heads up for what might come next in your life. Not your husband anymore, John. I left the note with the ring on the table and exited the house. I checked into a hotel with a weekly rate and waited. Grace was served with divorce papers by a deputy sheriff who did such work for Frank in his free time. She apparently had a meltdown and passed out. The doctor had to come out of his room in his underwear to help her. But an hour later, she called, furious and demanding to know why I had filed for divorce. I asked her why she'd even posed such a foolish question. I informed her that she'd been unfaithful to me for over 2 years, starting when she began seeing the orthopedist she inquired about when I discovered her affair. And I explained that it was just last Monday when I stumbled upon her birth control pills while looking for Tamiflu. I heard her sigh on the phone. After that, it all became quite clear. I ended the phone call. It seemed she hadn't read my letter. I didn't get much sleep, but I decided to go to work the following day. I found myself buried under a massive workload that had piled up with nowhere to go and no one to go home to. I started working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Max and I spoke frequently, and one day I inquired if the doctor was married and if so, whether there was a way to inform his wife. Max said he'd consider it. Grace was resisting the divorce. Although I hadn't seen or heard from her, her lawyer was in contact with Max. The hearing date was approaching, and I found myself in the same room as her, though she avoided making eye contact. I wore a suit with a black rose pinned to the lapel. The judge was unsympathetic and didn't favor divorce cases. Grace wanted us to undergo counseling, but Max questioned the point of it considering her ongoing affair. I candidly informed the judge that I wouldn't participate in any court-mandated counseling. I didn't care if he threatened me with jail. In my view, my wife had been dishonest, unfaithful, and deceitful, and I had no desire to be near her. I conveyed to him that, in my opinion, I hadn't done anything wrong, and it was Grace who had broken our marriage vows leading to the divorce. I suggested that she should be the one sent for counseling since she was the one who needed it. I was swiftly found guilty of contempt of court and fined, but I remained unfazed. I was furious, and Max had to escort me out of the courtroom before I said something that would land me in jail. He reminded me that it was just a hearing. I asked Max to check if Grace was avoiding the doctor. I intended to cause significant harm. Max hired a detective who set up a video camera in the doctor's break room and recorded their actions after work hours. Additionally, they caught her bad-mouthing me on an audio tape. Their encounters were explicit, making an X-rated movie seem mild. There was hardly any kissing or physical affection. They were purely physical partners. I inquired with Max about holding the hospital responsible. Now that we had video proof, he believed we couldn't use the video in court, but leaking it anonymously could tarnish the hospital's reputation and bring unwanted attention. He recommended waiting until after the divorce to send the video to the hospital administrators, the doctor's wife, our friends, and family. It was sound advice because if she got fired before the divorce was finalized, I might have to pay alimony, which I wanted to avoid. Finally, the divorce day arrived, and the judge granted it without any counseling attempts. He believed there was too much animosity, and our marriage was beyond repair. The next day, the video was leaked from an unrelated anonymous source, causing a major uproar. Grace called me and questioned why I did all of this. I reminded her that there was no proof I had leaked the video and thanked whoever did it. I also made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate infidelity, especially when it happened to my face, and continued even after I filed for divorce. She had broken 2 marriages. I told her it could have been worse, and she agreed. The situation worsened when our family and friends reacted to the video. The following day, everyone supported my side, and nobody had kind words for her. Everyone had believed we had a perfect marriage. That was 3 years ago, and I haven't seen or heard from Grace since then. She's been acting evasive and heavily stressed. I remarried a second time to an amazing woman, and we now have a 1-year-old daughter. My new wife desires a large family and plans to be a full-time mother, which is exactly what I've always wanted. If you're wondering what happened to Grace and William, their lives took a difficult turn. Grace attempted to communicate with me for nearly a year, although I'm not entirely sure why she tried. I didn't give her an opportunity to reconcile. Both William and Grace were abruptly terminated from their jobs. William's wife initiated divorce proceedings. Grace could have managed, but then I shared the video with our friends and family, which was the final blow for her. This led her to contemplate starting anew. Had she not contested the divorce, she might not have lost her job. Despite not wanting a divorce, Grace sought counseling, but my strong opposition led her to lose the case in court. Her second mistake was continuing her relationship with William and engaging in a romantic affair with him. I made a wise decision by waiting until our divorce was officially finalized before releasing the video. If I had done it earlier and she had lost her job, I would have been obligated to pay alimony. Eventually, Grace, feeling utterly embarrassed and humiliated, relocated to Oklahoma City and secured employment as a nurse in a doctor's office. Perhaps she's trying to rebuild her life, and I hope she's learned from her mistakes.